ג'ינה, אני השארתי את הדברים שלי בבית מדרש, קיבלתי את האור, סגרתי את הדלת, אני רץ לפגישה אחרת, עוד איזה שעה, שעה וחצי אני חוזר. אם את מסיימת, תנעלי, תפגעי הזקה, אני חוזר.
אוקיי, בסדר גמור.
תודה. אבל אם תראו שם את הציוד שלי, אל תתפלו, אני חוזר.
Okay. Erev Tov, Shavua Tov. Good to be back to our learning. Hello to those who are on Zoom. The microphone is good. You can hear? Wonderful. Okay. We're starting a new series. What? Yeah, I did. Yes.
Am I in the wrong country in the wrong season? No, it is Christmas time.
I'm very happy to be back to the learning, Baruch Hashem. I know here everybody around the table, but I don't know if everybody here knows everyone. Yes? No?
Yeah, I can't remember
Yes.
his name.
Okay, so just go around, please, Ellie, just to say your name.
Ellie Golan, Gary Gordon, Reba Judy Hillman, Nadine Zong, Sharon Farm.
Alexa Rain and Helen is from Ramat Gan is on the Zoom. So everybody says there's the camera and says hello. Here, there's the camera. Let's begin our learning by dedicating our limud to all those who are in need of a refuah shlema, refuat nefesh, refuat guf, for the safe return of our hostages, b'ri'im u'shlemim, to their families. Hashem should watch over our chayalim and keep them safe, help them to be successful in what they need to do. And all the people who need to go home back to their homes, may Be'ezrat Hashem, they return to their homes b'mera, quickly. Okay, our new series. Hello, welcome. Are you trying out the Midrash class?
Yeah.
Wonderful. What's your name?
Mira.
Mira. Take a seat. Take some sheets. And then take a seat.
But I still might do.
Okay. We are very excited to see many. Wonderful.
I know you made a whole lot say lovely. It's really that's the empty microphone.
I know that there are a lot of people who come from work.
Oh, just because.
Yes. Except that, see that.
Yeah, they cut stuff. I have to tell you, the one thing that's really is a massive problem is that if you are on Zoom, you cannot hear anything that's happening in the time.
It is to encourage you to come.
Yeah,
Okay. Before we begin our new series, which is what?
Have we tried to her away? It'll be better.
No. Hello. Wonderful. I'm so glad that you came. Come in. Please take a sheet. Erev Tov. Here. Take a seat.
Someone makes a comment.
B'kasha.
If somebody makes a comment, they say.
Yes, I know.
But
Por favor, pueden entrar. Por mucho gusto.
what is this now? Showing on what?
Is there an extra seat down there for Mira? Here. Okay. Before we begin our new series on Parshat Shavua through the prism of Midrash, it's important for me to give a short introduction to what is Midrash. Okay? That's a very important, a basic thing that we need to know. Many of us grew up on Midrashim, or the Midrash says, or even for children, the little Midrash says, right? But what exactly is Midrash, and why do we have it? What is its purpose? What does it come to teach us? So this is the single page here. What is Midrash? Midrash falls into two categories. When the subject is law and religious practice, it's called Midrash Halacha, while Midrash Agada interprets biblical narrative, exploring questions of ethics or theology, or creating homilies, isn't that a nice word? And parables based on the text. The word agada means telling. So we have two categories of midrash, midrash halacha and midrash agada. We will be focusing on midrash agada. The type of midrash most commonly referred to as in there is a midrash which says, is from the collection of midrash agada, most of which were compiled between about 200 and 1000 CE. Do you see this, how huge this time span reference is in terms of what we call the compilation of midrash? Many midrashim circulated orally before then. Not only that, we could even say that midrash continues to be written until today. It's a kind of interpretation of the psukim. What is the purpose of midrash? Why do we have it? Now, this is important. Number one, isn't this a nice word? Omnisignificance. This term, coined by the biblical scholar James Kubel, refers to the notion that every detail of the biblical text contains meaning. Every word in the Torah, there is a reason why it's written like this and not written like this. Why it's with a hey or without a hey. Why there are dots or why there are not dots. Any word or even a letter that might seem superfluous must be assigned a meaning, and this is where midrash comes in. Unusual usage or word forms must be explained, right? Why is this word used and not this word? This leads, yes.
Has anybody got the details? Because Ellen's messaging me to say that she can't
Get in.
It's on the website. If people go to the website.
On my
I
tab.
just don't have the time to.
The free, like the free,
Yeah.
free.
And if they go
free
onto the
Zoom,
Matan website,
Alright.
then it pops up TikTok with the free links.
Great, okay.
Right, man, it's free.
This leads to scrutiny of every verse that comes Chazal's way. Any perceived redundancy or potentially non-essential elements of the text will be assigned special meaning. If a word is repeated, then Chachamim will ask, why is the word repeated? If a word is missing, why is it missing, right? Everything has meaning. This is one of the purposes of Midrash. Though medieval and modern critics also read the text with great care, they are more likely to explain apparent superfluities or anomalies as being required by grammatical conventions or literary style. Meaning, many of the medieval and modern mefarshim commentaries will say, it's not that every single word is significant, but it's grammatically correct, or it's what? It's the style, right? It's signon. That's not what the Midrashim will say. Chazal prefer to find a specific meaning in the details of the text that have a broader moral or spiritual ramification. We're going to actually see that in today's shiur. Why is this word written like this? Well, if it's written like this and not like this, then there must be, right? There must be a reason for it. There must be meaning to it. The second is one that we are quite familiar with, and that is gap filling. All narrative texts have gaps or details of the story which are missing. A narrator must always choose which details to put into the story and which to leave out. Some of you actually work in this, right? What is the job of an editor? To decide what is necessary and what is not, what is extraneous material, what can we leave out. This is especially true of biblical narrative, whose sparse style often leaves out information of interest to the reader. For example, it's all right if the Torah says vatar vatened, she was pregnant and she gave birth, and we don't have an account of 9 months of pregnancy. That's okay. But a perfect example is this past week's Parshat Shavua, in which we are introduced to Abraham at the age of 75. What was Abraham doing all his life until 75? When we meet him, Lech lecha me'artzecha. Here comes the Midrash to do what? To tell us, to fill in the blanks, to give us all of Abraham's history, all the stories that we love so much in the Gan Yeladim about Abraham breaking the idols, right? All of this, not written in the biblical text. Here come the Baalei Midrash, right? To fill in the gaps, to tell us those stories.
You know?
Yes. As I said, from about 200 to the year 1000, all different rabbis, Tanaim, those who are at the same time studying and writing the Mishnah and the Talmud, but also not many of them are, we'll see rabbis who are giving a sermon to their congregation. Many of them we are familiar with because we see them, right? As I said, in the Mishnah and the Talmud, and others not. But they are speaking to their congregants, right? Or they are giving drashot, and their drashot are, as it were, meaningful enough, right, to be written down.
So what you're saying about the story of Avram?
Yes.
Is it something that is something that was devised to as an
Okay,
example?
that's a good question. Wait, okay, it's a very good question. Okay, Alexa is asking, are they making it up? Are they making it up? The Balei Midrash cannot make anything up. There needs to be a basis in the text of the Torah. They cannot make up any of these stories, okay?
Except that they often contradict each other.
Excellent point. Many times Midrashim will contradict each other. Okay, we'll get there.
So the story about Avram with the idol.
Yes.
Anywhere in the Torah?
No, but there will be hints. Meaning they have to base it, they're extrapolated based on, right, certain things in the text. 100%.
Come down in a different way.
The rabbis made an effort to fill in the gaps. They seek to provide us with a rich and detailed an image of the biblical events and characters as they can. The number 3, dialogue between distant verses. Modern reading strategies tend to emphasize understanding a word or a sentence in terms of its immediate context, meaning you don't understand a word, what do? You don't have a dictionary. You don't have your, what do?
Context.
You try to figure it out from its context. They direct us to read an entire passage or a poem in order to understand the word in terms of its context. Chazal, Chachamim, were also aware of the value of such reading, but they generally prefer to read individual verses not in light of their immediate neighbors, but in light of a distant verse elsewhere in the Torah. Meaning, if a similar word or a similar theme or a similar topic is being discussed, they will go from Breshit to what? To Vayikra, right? Not necessarily only keeping in terms of context. Now, this is what Gaby brought up, resolving contradictory verses. The Torah not infrequently contradicts itself, or at least appears to. It will present 2 different accounts of the same events, or 2 conflicting laws regarding the same situation. For Chazal, the Bible is a unified book which cannot contain any contradictions. Hence, these conflicting verses must be reconciled. Chazal will produce a reading of the verses that harmonizes the 2. Sometimes they will reinterpret one verse in light of the other. The most famous example that we are familiar with will be, for example, to reinterpret both verses, creating a new meaning. For example, Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. This is in reference to what? The fact that there are 2 versions of the 10 Commandments. With regard to one, it says what? Zachor Yom Shabbat, and the other time it says what? Shamo. One, right? Remember the Shabbat and keep it. The other, guard. So what do we do with the fact that there are 2 versions? We don't say there are 2 authors. Obviously, it's God-given. So how do the Chachamim come and reconcile the 2 versions of the Aseret HaDibrot? By explaining, Shamo v'Zachor b'dibur echad. God said both of them, but what? He said them both simultaneously. Correct? Correct? And one time, right, we heard this, we heard that. Each time we heard what we needed to hear. But there are not 2 authors or 2 different versions, both said by Hashem. The other is creating thematic and linguistic connections. The rabbis would juxtapose 2 or more verses, not because the conflict, but because they see a deeper connection between the 2. Often rabbis will see a common theme between them. In other cases, it's a common word or a phrase. By placing these texts next to each other, the rabbis call attention to and emphasize aspects of both verses that are not apparent when each verse is examined individually. Meaning, we will come to compare and contrast psukim based on the fact that a similar word is used in both. Just give you throw out an idea. We just read Parshat Noach. What does Noach build? A teva, okay? There is one other place in the Torah in which there is a teva, Moshe, correct? Moshe's mother builds for him what? A teva. The rabbis cannot ignore, right? We grew up with the basket and the bulrushes and the basket. No basket, folks, no basket, okay? Teva, what is teva? She built for him what? An ark. That's what she built. Only 2 times in the Torah that word appears. Chazal will make a connection between these personalities, between the water, right? Between Noach and Moshe, all based on what? The word teva, okay? But there are many other examples. In terms of halachic midrash, we have many times in which in the Torah it is written, you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. Will come the rabbis of the Midrash and say, why so many times is it repeated? Each time it pertains to what? To something else. To cooking, to deriving pleasure, to selling, to eating. Each time it's mentioned, it is what? To teach us something else. It's not just that the Torah is being repetitive. There's no such thing as the Torah just being repetitive. In the view of the rabbis, in reading the biblical text, we actually generate meaning from out of the raw material that is the Bible. In principle, any given verse can produce infinite meanings. And this we'll often see that one pasuk will be interpreted and there will be various midrashim, and some midrashim actually what? Saying the complete opposite. Okay, based on that, really, we believe that Shivim Panim La Torah, there are 70 ways of interpreting. Indeed, Chazal tend to seek as much meaning as possible from each and every verse. This does not, of course, mean that the biblical text may mean anything we want it to. Quite the contrary, only rabbis who are trained in the tradition and ways of Midrash know the proper way to grow the meaning of the text. The writers of the Midrash felt that they were, this is an important concept, uncovering what was already there. The people who wrote Midrash and when it was compiled, they were not inventing. They were more like archaeologists, okay? It was there underneath the meaning of the text. And what are they doing? They're digging a little bit and, right? And then digging a little bit more and digging a little bit more. That's how they saw their job. But when a rabbi delivered a midrashic discourse in a Beit Midrash or in a synagogue, he was not interested merely in explicating the text. The drasha, that's what the midrashic sermon was called, was the rabbi's primary method of communicating rabbinic ideas about a wide range of issues to his followers. This is a very important role that historically Midrash played before it was written down in a book called Bereshit Rabbah or Shmot Rabbah. It was a way for the Rav to speak to his congregation and give over what? An important message, okay? These include theological ideas about the nature of God, about our relationship to him, ethical and social positions regarding the conduct of the individual and the community, even political positions regarding the ruling powers of the day. Often these positions emerge from their study of the biblical text. However, the rabbis also relied on received oral traditions as well as their own powers of reasons in formulating their positions. In their midrashim, however, the rabbis did not systematically distinguish between the various sources of their teachings. Rather, they wove them together in a single fabric. And so many times the midrash will appear to be in a story-like form or in a parable or in an example, because it's supposed to be, first of all, interesting for the audience. And we always remember stories when they are told over. It's one thing that sticks in our minds. And many times the purpose of the midrash was to give over an important idea. Why do I say this? Because when we learned midrash as children, it had a purpose. Its purpose was to engage us, to make Torah learning fun and exciting. Who doesn't love the beautiful midrash about why God chose Har Sinai? All the mountains were arguing. Let the Torah be given on me, right? And Har Sinai was quiet. It was a very humble mountain. And because Har Sinai did not speak up, Hashem said, I will give the Torah on you. My children learned it in the Gan Yeladim and then learned it again when they were in school. It's a beautiful, beautiful midrash. Okay, now we come to that midrash as adults. There are two possibilities. One is we automatically reject it and we say, Bo b'maintes, right? זה סיפורים לילדים, מאוד יפה, but we know we all are adults here. We don't believe that mountains speak and mountains argue, and surely not that they are debating. Okay, that's very fanciful and almost appropriate for children. True, but if we come to that very same midrash as adults, now we can start to take it apart and ask, what was the author of the midrash trying to teach? What he was trying to teach was about the place where Torah is given is a place of humility. How is Moshe Rabbeinu described? Ish anav mikol adam, the most humblest of men. So now put together a humble mountain and a humble man, and we're making a statement about Torah, right? Which is the place where Torah comes from is a place of humility. That's the lesson of the Midrash. So when we're in Kita Aleph and Bet, let us imagine mountains talking because it's wonderful. It makes Torah come alive. But when we come to that same Midrash as adults, let's not reject it off the bat and say it's what? It's Sipurei Yeladim. Let's try to understand what is it? What's the message behind that beautiful and perhaps fanciful story? There's lots of Midrashim like that. Okay, there's a wonderful midrash about a conversation between Noach and the raven, and they're talking back and forth. Okay, well, did they actually speak? Did they? Oh, that's a good question. I'm doubtful, right? But there was a
year to learn
right, okay, he could have learned raven. Midrashim are carefully constructed works of art that are designed to be beautiful and pleasing to read. They often present dramatic stories and poetically constructed passages. Chazal did this in part to make their teachings more accessible and interesting. In most Midrashim, these three concerns, the textual, the ideological, and the aesthetic, are woven together in a single text. The fact that they were concerned that it should be aesthetic, pleasing to the ear, not so much to the eye, but that they should be interesting, right, was very important. Otherwise, you couldn't engage your audience, right? If it was boring, then everyone would fall asleep and no one would walk out, right, with the message which you were trying to give over. The first collection of Midrashim to be compiled were Tanakh Midrashim. This is the time period of the Mishnah. These texts present the work of the rabbis who are featured in the Mishnah. And these Midrashim, so many of the authors we're familiar with because we know them from the Mishnah. These Midrashim were probably edited around the year 200 CE. The Midrashim in this group are the Mechilta on Sefer Shmot, the Sifri on Sefer Vayikra, and the Sifri on Bamidbar and Dvarim. These books are often referred to as halachic midrashim. With the period of the Amoraim, the rabbis associated with the Talmud. Then we have what we call Midrash Agadah. These are works which have minimal or no halachic content, but more what stories, as it were. One of the first such midrashim was Breshit Rabbah. The book of Breshit, of course, has almost no halachic material. Why is that? Because we have very few mitzvot in Sefer Bereshit, right? We have the commandments to Adam and Eve and to Noach, be fruitful and multiply. We have to Abraham about Brit Milah, right? And that we do not eat the sciatic nerve, the Gid Anasheh. That's it. We've completed all the mitzvot in Sefer Bereshit. But with regard to the stories, there are a lot of midrashim. One of the first is Breshit Rabbah. The book of Breshit, of course, has almost no halachic material. When Breshit Rabbah was produced, it meant that they were now midrashim on all the 5 books of Torah.
What's an example of midrash halachic?
Sort of an example. I'll think of it. Okay, today I want to look at something interesting in the parasha, which we need to extrapolate from the midrash, because the Torah simply doesn't tell us, right? Parashat Vayera, we have the story of Sodom and Amorah. Lot has made a decision, right, to separate from Abraham, and he's chosen, right, the area around Sodom. Why? Because economically, this is a good choice for him. He has a great deal of sheep. right? And so does Abraham. The place where they are, it's not, the land can't, right? Support, thank you, can't support two very large sheep, people with sheep, and therefore each one makes a decision to go their separate ways. What does Lot choose? Lot chooses Sodom. But the Torah also tells us that the city of Sodom is full of wicked people. Anashim ra'im v'chata'im leHashem me'od. Not often does the Torah use the word me'od, but in this case it does, right? They're wicked people in the city of Sodom, and this will have an impact on Lot because he is living there. God makes a decision, and that is that he is going to destroy the city of Sodom and Amorah. He will save what? He will save Lot and their families. Before that decision, of course, there is what? There is a discussion between Abraham and God, right? Perhaps there are 50 righteous people, right? And God said, I would spare the city if there were 50 righteous people. What does Abraham then realize? There are no 50 righteous people, right? He goes down until he arrives at the number 10. Vayomer Hashem, God said, Zakat Sodom v'Amorah ki rabach v'chatatam kveda me'od. God said, the outcry of Sodom and Amorah is great, and their transgressions are very grave. Erdana ve'er'eh haketzacata haba'a elai asu kala ve'im lo eda'a. I will go down and see if they have done as that outcry indicates, for if they have, then I shall utterly destroy them. What is the sin of Sodom and Amorah? We don't know. It says, Chatatam kveda me'od. Their sin is very grievous. It's very serious. But the Torah does not detail what is the sin of Sodom and Amorah. Here will come in what? The Midrash, right? And tell us what is the sin of Sodom and Amorah. But, as Alexa pointed out, they can't make it up. It has to be based on something in the text. So the Torah does not specify the sin of why Sodom is destroyed. In general, it just says their sin was very serious and there was a great cry from there. The answer does not appear in the Chumash, but it does appear somewhere else in Tanakh, in Yecheskel chapter 16. Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and the needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore, I did away with them, as you have seen. Here, the Navi is very clear. What does he say? Here it's written. What is the sin of Sodom Amorah? Ge'on siv'at lechem v'shalvat hashket hayala ulvnotea v'yad ani ve'evyon lo hechzika. The sin of Sodom and Amorah is what? They didn't help the poor, and they were very arrogant. This is the sin. Now, it's interesting, right? That from the Navi, here's the answer. Okay, so now, based on this, the Balei HaMidrash can now what? They have something to work with. Something to work with. Arrogance, and the fact that they didn't what? Help the poor. Why is this interesting? Because are these such grievous sins that for this the city of Sodom deserves to be destroyed? Okay, so they were arrogant. We all know people who were arrogant, right? And what? So they didn't help the poor. Okay, they didn't help the poor. Okay, terrible that for this the city of Sodom needs to be destroyed. Obviously, it's much more grievous than, right, than we can imagine, right? You know, as a child, you know, we used to hear in English, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? What did you imagine when you heard Sodom and Gomorrah, right? You imagined what? Like complete debauchery. Exactly. Complete, right, and utter corruption, right? Gambling casinos, prostitution, right? That's what you imagine.
It's given its name to a very serious assault.
Yes, correct. But I'm saying that, right? But actually, it's Ben Adam lechavero. That's the issue in Sodom and Amorah, right? They don't take care of the poor. They are very arrogant and they don't care about anybody else. Okay. The main sin of Sodom was arrogance, which led the Sodomites to sin by ignoring the poor. Why were they so arrogant? Comes the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin and explains. The people of Sodom were arrogant only because of their wealth. They said, since we are an affluent society, Immigrants will only cut into our share of the pie. Come, let us ban immigration. Trying to close the doors to immigrants is not a new phenomenon. The haves often want to keep out what? The have-nots. And they refuse to share their supply of water and food with those in need, and chose instead to isolate themselves and their communities and not allow entry to anybody seeking assistance. Okay?
What's happening there?
What is the Midrash Haggadah here in the Gemara and Sanhedrin telling us? That Sodom was a very affluent society. It wasn't that they didn't help the poor because they didn't have. They didn't help the poor because what? They didn't want to. They thought that by helping the poor, I'm taking away from what is rightfully mine. But the laws of tzedakah actually say what? You're only giving. It's not yours, right? It's yours for safekeeping, right? Until someone needs, right? The Torah describes Sodom. The city sat well watered beside the Jordan River and looked to him like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This is what Lot saw. שחט השם את סדום ואת עמורה, כגן השם כארץ מצרים באחו צוהר. The guaranteed water means guaranteed food and comfort, and two things could make Sodom or Egypt seem like a Garden of Eden. Of course, if you're living, right, in a arid climate, a place that has resource of water becomes prime real estate, right? Wonderful. And that's what Sodom has. It has water. When the people of Sodom became wealthy, they selfishly kept their money for themselves. Rabbanit Chana Henkin explains, it's not adultery, paganism, murder, battery, or theft which caused the destruction of Sodom. And this is what we might think, because this is what we always refer to as what? These are the worst crimes. It was the arrogance of the wealthy who took it for granted that what was theirs alone, and that economic bounty need not be shared with the disadvantaged. The main sin of Sodom was selfishness, a lethal combination of arrogance and wealth, which is fascinating because suddenly, what? Sodom could be us. That's the scary part. Meaning, it's so easy to describe Sodom as what? Oh my God, a completely, what? Place of depravity and what? But what? What did they do? What was so terrible? Why did Hashem destroy Sodom? They were selfish. They wanted to keep their money to themselves. They didn't want to help anyone. And this arrogance, right? This arrogance led them to all kinds of terrible things, right? To not help anyone else. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot teaches. There's a whole list. There's 4 categories of sheli, shelcha, shelcha. One who says, Haomer, sheli, sheli, veshelcha, shelcha. What's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. Zo midah benonit. This is a medium trait, or I prefer the translation. This is an average trait. Okay, benonit. Okay, meaning what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. This is a very kind of what? Live and let live attitude. It's not bad. It's not good. It's what? Average. Benoni. Okay, medium. Right. The idea being that most people live in a climate in which they say, I won't bother you, and what? And you don't bother me, and we'll live. Now, the truth is, think about where we live in this country. We would be very happy if certain of our neighbors would say, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, and we'll live. Shalom al Yisrael. No. Okay. So it's not a negative thing, it's benoni. But look, veyesh omrim, there's a second opinion. Zo midat Sodom, this is the character of Sodom. How did we get from average, benoni, to what? To Sodom. How did we get there? If this is okay, it's not good, it's not bad, it's average, it's most people. How did we get from benoni all the way to Sodom? When one's fellow man can support himself, it's normal to say what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. It may not reflect Avram's generosity, but it's far from Sodom's miserliness. But when one's fellow man lacks that in which to sustain himself, then holding back becomes midat Sodom. In other words, what made the sin of Sodom so bad wasn't that they were selfish, it was they were selfish when in fact they could have afforded to be generous. Meaning, sheli, shelcha, shelcha, b'midah benonit, if what? If you have and I have, that's okay. But if you don't have, and I have, and I say, sheli, sheli, v'shelcha, shelcha, this becomes midat sdom. Why? Because I can help you. I have to help you, and I choose not to do it. Okay? Then it becomes a problem. Reb Moshe Avigdor Amiel, who was the former chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, provides an interpretation of the Mishnah. If an individual says, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, in the singular, then this is an average character trait. But if this statement becomes the communal norm in the plural, yesh omrim, he reads it, not yesh omrim, there's another opinion, but yesh omrim, meaning what? Everybody says it. Everybody says it. This now becomes the norm. What's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. This is a slippery slope between an individual citizen who adopts a mind your own business stance and an entire society that refuses to share with those who don't have. By preventing others benefiting from one's property, one avoids the need to show hospitality to the stranger, to the less fortunate, to the poor, to anyone who is needy in society. To every man for himself attitude may seem harmless, but it could lead to evil. The way he reads, sheli, sheli, shelcha, shelcha, zo midah benonit, v'yesh omrim zo midat sdom, it can lead, if a whole society is like that, and not certain individuals, but everyone, then little by little, what started out as what, a quite average trait, can become Sdom, can become Sdom-like, right? And therefore we have to be careful. If my neighbor's house catches on fire and my attitude is, it's not my business, they don't need to care, we are dangerously approaching the attitude of Sdom. Why?
Because people will die because we don't care about them.
Okay, people will die, I don't care. And not only that, my neighbor's house, you think it doesn't affect me? It will affect me. What happens with fire? It spreads. Fire spreads, right? To close my eyes and close my house from what's going on outside, that becomes midat sdom. Now we have a
So wait
midrash.
a minute, so you're saying that, I understand the fact of not helping someone when you can, but you're saying it's the isolationism as well. The fact that
Correct.
they don't take into account that if their house is burning, your house can burn as well. But that only affects them. It doesn't affect society.
It's your problem, it doesn't affect me. It's your problem.
But you said
not
something
mine.
else. You said,
Oh, I say it can also
your
affect
problem
me.
will affect.
Correct. Correct.
So as a society, we have to be aware to prevent fires, put the fires out
Put the
before,
fire out.
before the whole
Correct.
society burns.
Right, correct.
But, was Sodom always like this, or did they became like this because one by one, like started, because somebody in Sodom must have said, I'm poor, I need some help, and then others said no, and then suddenly what? They also then said, okay, fine, I'm also not gonna help, I'm still poor, I'm not getting anything, but I'm still not going to help, like, it just kind of like.
It's a very good
It's
point.
up,
It's a very good
Right.
point because
Could be the whole
what
class system.
may begin as just an isolated event then becomes the societal norm. That's one. And then after it becomes the societal norm, it becomes law. No one is allowed to help the poor. This is the law in Sodom, right? So you're right. It starts out small. It may or may not have always been this way, but it began small and then it spread, and then this is the law in Sodom. It always interests me how they allowed Lot to come in, because Lot was what? Was an outsider.
Because he
How did
was
Lot
rich.
come
He
in?
had money.
What?
He was rich.
He was rich, correct. That's the answer. That's the answer. Lot was very rich.
If you want to immigrate to Australia, you can do
You
it.
can,
You're not
if you
allowed
have
to-
lots of money. Australia is very strict in that way, correct?
But you have money, you get it.
If you have money, you can get it.
Just start calculating to, again, the class system. People who were born into a class, there's everything about
How about somebody else?
That's how
Okay.
societies.
Help my
Yeah, it's built on a completely different principle.
and then abusing the health system.
So, Midrash Vayikra Rabbah. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught. Some people were on a boat and one took out a drill and began drilling a hole under his seat. The others were very upset. Don't worry, he said, I'm not drilling a hole under your seat, but only under mine. And they said, you will sink the boat and we will all drown. Okay, so it's a wonderful story, but I actually didn't know that its source is a Midrash in Vayikra Rabbah. And this is fascinating, who is the author or who is the speaking? Shimon Bar Yochai, the one who lived in a cave,
By himself.
by himself, and
Maybe
separated himself.
became
Yes,
Yeah.
right? The realization that what? We're all in this boat together, and a person who drills a hole and says, I'm only affecting me, doesn't realize, what do you mean I'm only under my seat? As soon as the water begins to come in, what? We're all gonna drown, right? That we're interconnected. We're all connected and dependent on each other. No man is an island. People that neither hurt nor help could be considered average, but we are not meant to strive to be average. We are meant to care about the welfare of others. We live today in a time of individualism. iPhone, iPad, everything is what? I, right? We listen to our own playlists of music. We read our own individualized news. My children commented on this recently. They said, they're not, okay, they're in their late 20s, early 30s, but they said, remember we used to sit and watch television together, right? And someone would laugh and someone else would make a comment and we all used to sit on the sofa and watch TV together. Okay. And now everybody is what? Watching their own, right? So something about what? The collective is lost, but on the other hand, I can tailor the program to what? To what I specifically like and what I want to watch and when I want to
But
watch
we don't
it.
need to compromise
But
because.
It's only about what I want. Manyan. We listen to our, okay. This can lead us to forget that we are part of a larger community. If one of us is in trouble, we must all join together to repair the whole. A passage in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer explains why Sodom was worthy of destruction. The Midrash writes, they issued a proclamation in Sodom stating it was declared in Sodom, whoever shares his bread with a stranger, orphan, and the poor shall be set on fire. So this is to answer Shushu's question. It then became law. It then became law. The Midrash tells two tales of women who dared to lend a helping hand to beggars and what happened to them. These stories too have to be based on a reference in the text. Okay, we'll see that in a minute. Two young women of Sodom met at the well, where they had both gone to drink and fill up their water jugs. One girl asked her friend, why is your face so pale? And her friend answered, we have nothing to eat at home. We're dying of starvation. Her compassionate friend filled her own jug with flour and exchanged it for her friend's jug of water. When the Sodomites found out about her acts, they burnt her to death. Okay, what is she doing? She's attempting to help her friend in a way which no one should discover what she's doing. She's sneaking, right? Food, right, in her empty jug to her friend. Of course, she is found out and burnt to death. Why? Because she's gone against the law in Sodom. Okay. Verse 21 in the Psukim states that it was tza'aka, hakitza'akata. A certain cry emanated from Sodom, which aroused God's wrath. What was the nature of this cry, which led to the destruction of Sodom? What cry has the power to bring about the annihilation of a whole city? The Ramban identifies this cry with the cry of the poor and the oppressed. Rashi explains that the feminine possessive form, tza'akata, her cry, relates to the cry of the city, which is feminine in Hebrew, but the Midrash says, this is the cry of the women. Why? Every time anyone attempts to help the poor, the Balei Midrash say what? It's a woman who had compassion, who went against the law in Sodom. And therefore, how is this presented in the biblical text? By the word, her cry. Her cry in the feminine, and not her cry relating to what? The city, right? The city didn't cry. She cried. Who was she? The women who were punished for helping. Okay, that's the basis of these stories of the Midrash. The second story relates, it was announced in Sodom, whoever gives bread to a poor person will be burnt at the stake. Flotit, the daughter of Lot, who was married to an important person from Sodom, saw a poor man who was so hungry that he was unable to stand. She felt sorry for him. From then on, she made sure to pass him every day on her way to the well, and she would feed him food that she had stashed in her water jug. People wondered how the man managed to survive. Upon investigation, they discovered what she had done, and they burned her. Before she died, she turned to God and cried, Master of the world, carry out justice on my behalf. And her cries pierced the heavens. And at that moment, God said, I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as this outcry that has reached me. And so, according to the Midrash, also Bereshit Rabbah and Yalkut Shimoni, the cry that pierces the heavens is what? The cry of these women. These cry of these women who are making an attempt to help the poor, going against the law of Sodom, and what? Are being punished, are being burned because of it. The beginning of the Midrash describes a general proclamation forbidding the giving of charity. The wickedness of Sodom was not a trait of fringe elements nor of an ignorant mass. It was embedded within the law of the city. It was the very definition of justice. The law itself was the source of evil in Sodom. It's also interesting that as opposed to Bereshit 19, which depicts Sodom as a xenophobic society, directing its hate at foreigners, the Midrash depicts cruelty as an internal attribute governing the people's relationship with each other. Meaning, they see a person who's suffering, doesn't have what to eat, and they literally what? They turn their heads, they ignore it, and they keep walking by. Cruelty towards strangers inevitably leads to cruelty towards neighbors. This is an important point that Midrash is trying to make. Because if at first it began with being cruel to outsiders or leaving people out, what ends up happening is once you exhibit cruelty to other people, little by little, it begins to what? Come into your own, in effects. Why? What happened when Lot brings 2 visitors into his house? A mob comes outside his door and says, give us those guests so that we will what? We will kill them, right? Sodomize them, right? So that we will kill them. But what is Lot to the people of Sodom? He's now one of them. But now we turn against what? We turn against each other as well. Sodom has no mercy for its own poor. It acts viciously towards its own inhabitants. Their sin is not so much in what they did, but rather in what they did not do. They cared not for the poor within them. So it begins with outsiders and then within their own society. Professor Nechama Leibovich comments on this story as follows. The height of their wickedness lay not in their activities of individual sinners, but in the fact that such terrible behavior was the norm. It was the law in Sodom. Their wickedness was not committed in secret as something to be ashamed of. There was no remedy for such a horrible society, but total destruction. Gina explains why Hashem has no recourse, but to what? But to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. There's no way to come back from this, right? This type of cruelty. From these 2 midrashim, what do we learn about the society of Sodom? First of all, that they've made it a law that you're not allowed to help anyone, right? And is everyone like that? Well, there are people who attempt to what? Break the law. And what happens? They are punished in such a grievous way so that no one else will what? Will do it, right? What happens if you behave differently? Obviously, you're killed. Whose cry did Hashem hear? Hashem hears the cry of these women who what? Who are attempting, right, to help the poor. It's not by chance that the 2 stories in the Midrash highlight the actions of women. Rav Hirsch points out that rachamim comes from the root word rechem, a womb. What is the connection between compassion and womb? One suggestion is that having compassion for another means protective, being protective, as a womb is a protection of the fetus, which is an interesting idea, okay? That the root of the word rachamim is not so much compassion as it is to what? To kind of want to offer protection, right, of someone else. Another idea is that compassion is an emotion rather than a thought process. And we feel compassion for others as if it's coming from our, I couldn't find a better word, kishkas. Don't think of a better word. Okay, it's here, right? It's in our gut, right? Or since we were all in the womb before birth, we can somehow relate to others because we started from a similar place. That's very beautiful because then it doesn't exclude men, right? Who can also be compassionate. Why? Because we all started in the rechem, all of us. We were all protected. We all understand that type of feeling. Rav Hirsch says, the womb connotes an image of deep closeness and interconnectivity. The child maintains its own individuality, and yet it is completely interconnected and dependent on the mother. So too compassion, and not pity, flows from one distinct entity to another as a result of the inherent closeness that they share. When you have rachamim, you feel others' pain, but you also see the bigger picture. Your vision broadens, and instead of judging harshly and quickly, you can be patient with others' failings, giving them space to fall and get back up. He makes a big distinction between pity and compassion. Not the same thing, right? To have pity means
Feel
what
sorry
is
for
it?
someone.
You feel sorry, you
When
feel
have
sorry.
Compassion or empathy, you feel what they're feeling.
Okay. On a deeper level, though, the rechem, the womb, is representative of the purity with which the child comes into this world. One who has rachamim, therefore, looks to others and sees their pure source, or can see their goodness. They focus on the potential the person has, as opposed to what they might be exhibiting currently. Meaning that the trait of rachamim is that I can look at someone and hopefully see their what? Their core goodness, right?
Humanity.
Right, yafeh. And surely Judaism believes that everyone is born, right? Pure soul, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai hi, right? Everyone, yes, everyone created in Tzelem Elokim. One of Hashem's attributes is that he is El Rachum v'Chanun. He is compassionate. Compassion is a characteristic of God, and as his children, we must show this characteristic as well. What's fascinating is that the cities of Sodom and Amorah are not Jewish cities, okay? But what is expected of them? What does God expect from them? Yes, moral behavior. That everyone is supposed to care about their fellow man, treat people with compassion, give to others. This is what is expected. Interesting that the Navi calls Sodom and Amorah achotcha. What? Your sister cities, right? Meaning, this is why Sodom and Amorah were destroyed. Be careful not to go, what? To follow their example. I'm at the top of page 5. The instructions that the angels give to Lot is to flee from Sodom. Flee for your lives, don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away. Okay? Himalet, meaning they actually had to what? They had to distance themselves from Sodom. Would be wonderful. We could imagine a flying carpet, right? Takes them away. But it's not what the text says. The text says, run for your lives, and don't look back, right? That's the instruction. Vatabet ishto me'achorav, and Lot's wife looked back. Vatahi netziv melech, and she became a pillar of salt. Why? That's very curious. Again, wonderful children's story. We go down to what? Yam HaMelech, we see the Netziv, pillar of salt, Lot's wife, right? But what's the story there? What's the deal with that? She became a pillar of salt. Has that ever bothered you? What does it mean? What does that mean?
She didn't get food, she wasn't hospitable.
Okay, what is salt? That's what we have to ask. The Balei Midrash wants us to ask, what is salt? When the Torah says she turned into a pillar of salt, for us to ask, what is salt? Why is the Torah telling us she turned into a pillar of salt? And think of the word netziv. She didn't just turn into salt, she turned into a netziv melach. What is netziv? Lehityatzef, right? To stand at attention, right? Aninitzav, right? Meaning she is what? She's standing straight, yafeh. And in the ancient world, what is salt? It's a preservative. When there's no refrigeration, in a time when there's no refrigeration, it's the only way you can keep food is with what? Salt. She's what? It's the Torah's way of telling us what? She's stuck. It's the Torah's way of telling us she is stuck. She looked back at what she was leaving, and what? She can't look forward. She can't look forward. She can only look back on Sodom with great what? longing is a good word, right? Longing. She can't look forward. Rashi explains, it's not fitting that you should witness their doom while you yourself are escaping. That's for sure one reason, because what's the word in English? Voyeurism or something like that, right? Where there's an accident and everybody everyone needs to look and see what's happening, right? It's this tremendous curiosity, right? To see something terrible which happens to someone else, which is nora v'ayom, but we all do it, right? Out of this, so it's not appropriate while people are being killed and dead that you should look. That's one. The Midrash Haggadah says that a sense of compassion rose up within her over her married daughters who were left in Sodom, and therefore she looked back to see if they were following her. That actually makes her
terrible.
Exactly. That actually makes the wife of Lot what?
Compassionate.
Very human, very human. Her two daughters who were not married came with them. The two daughters who were married to people in Sodom were what? Left behind. And she was hoping to the last minute that perhaps what? Those two daughters would what?
See the light.
Would okay, that's a very, very beautiful explanation. But why is she turned into a pillar of salt? The people of Sodom were known for their cruelty to strangers. In fact, inhospitality was included in their code of law. Lot was the exception. Although he lived in Sodom, the years that he'd spent with his uncle Avraham had influenced him. He learned to copy Avraham's hospitality. When two angels came disguised as men, Lot invited them in, served them food. His wife, who was a native of Sodom, disapproved. She was very upset. Lot asked his wife for salt for the guests, and she replied, also this evil custom you wish to introduce into this place? Salt was expensive, and it showed respect for the guests when you offered them salt. As a matter of fact, I was reading on the internet, the word salary comes from salt. They used to pay the Roman soldiers in salt, correct. She had no salt in the house. She went from door to door asking neighbors for salt for her husband's guests, letting everyone know that Lot had ignored the laws of the city by inviting strangers. A short time later, a mob gathers. So what does the Midrash say? Lot's wife sinned with salt, and therefore she was punished with salt. This is the conclusion of the Midrash, that salt was not stam, but rather it's connected back to the story of what? Hospitality, or in this case, inhospitality, right? And that's why specifically the Torah says, right, she turns into a pillar of salt. Lot's wife is a cautionary tale, not because it scares us into thinking that we should ignore God, will be turned into salt, because it makes us think if we are insensitive to the suffering of others and we don't do anything about it, we might become like the wife of Lot. I want to conclude with this. The bottom of page 6, the Ralbag, the Chizkuni, and Rabbeinu B'Chayei, it's the first time I've ever seen this. Also citing Ibn Ezra, explained that it was not Lot's wife that was turned to salt, but the land was turned to salt, i.e. it was destroyed. It's the first time I ever saw this Perush. I said, I need to share it. It's fascinating. Meaning, to read the Pasuk, V'tabet ishto me'achorav, Vatehi Netziv Melach doesn't mean she, the wife of Lot, but the land became salt. Why is that relevant according to these Parshanim? Because land which has, soil which has large deposits of salt cannot grow anything, So the destruction of Sodom is complete. Why? When the earth that was so fertile, right, and refused to share, becomes a land full of salt, which cannot grow anything. This is the destruction, the final destruction of Sodom. Not that the Pasuk is speaking about her, but rather speaking about, right, the land. Lot's wife didn't listen. She didn't take the angel's warning seriously. Perhaps she was distracted by what was happening behind her, or she was more comfortable dwelling in the past. The future is scary and unknown after all. The past is familiar and comfortable. Lot's wife didn't know how to stop looking back and start moving forward, and she paid with her life. The idea that, indeed, the description of Netziv Melach, right, may or may not be that she actually turned into a pillar of salt, but she couldn't stop what? Looking back. And perhaps she even what? Stayed in her place. And therefore Lot, what? Moved on. And she, what? She stayed.
She stayed in her
She stayed.
place of believing that the way she was living was right.
Correct?
She didn't
Correct.
say, I should have given them salt, I should have been nice.
She has the opportunity to be saved. But in order to be saved, what does she have to do? She has to reject Sodom. And she can't. She still believes that that is the right place. And therefore, she doesn't move on. The only one who is saved is Lot, right? And his 2 daughters. So I wanted to end with this because I thought that it's very relevant. Salt is a preservative and helps things stay the way they are. Avraham, by contrast, is in movement. Avraham is what? Lech lecha, right? And so we have 2 characters who are complete opposites. We have Avraham, who is constantly what? In motion, in movement, right? This week's Parshat Va'era, begins with Avraham welcoming the guests. And you know how many times the word ratz, vayimaher, appears. He's running. He's doing things quickly. He's constantly in motion, in contrast to the wife of Lot, who what? She's a Netziv. She is Melach. She's what? She's stuck. She's stuck in the past, or she's stuck in the negative place of Sodom, and she simply can't, right? See anything else. She can't move on. She's given the opportunity to save herself, and yet what? She was brought up in Sodom, and therefore she still thinks that that's the right way. It's again chaval and shame, right? Misken.
She also didn't listen. She
Right.
was told.
She was told, don't look back, and she can't help herself. Nachon. I think, though, that what we learn about what is the sin of Sodom, and that suddenly frightened me, is that it could easily could describe many places in modern society. It's not that we have to draw a picture of some place in which the people are what? Criminals, right? Perfect. But rather, it's people who have become exceedingly selfish and refuse to help anybody else. We have to be careful, right? That sheli v'shelcha shelcha does not become midat Sodom, right?
So I'm thinking the association of Sodom with sexual perversion has come about then because of their lack of respect. Because it leads to
one leads to another.
Because that is what they're mostly known for.
Yes, but it's that one episode. Correct.
But what I'm saying is the fact that they would behave like that comes from their complete disregard
For anybody else.
For anybody else.
Correct.
and self-gratification.
Mamash, okay.
Just doing what.
Thank you, everybody. Laila Tov, I'm sorry that we're a few minutes late. I apologize.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, Ellen. Good to see
I
you.
had a problem getting in.
Is your microphone on?
It should be. Do you hear
Should
me?
be.
It's
Maybe mine is not.
It says it's on.
Our next year is in 2 weeks' time. I'm looking forward to seeing you.
I will be there.
Okay.
I will be in Israel.
Gina,
Doing the way that we do the partial editing, the one that comes after.
Upcoming.
Gina,
I hear you, but
Yes.
she doesn't.
she can't hear.
She couldn't hear me either.
Yeah, I bet.
Gina,
I wait. Ellen, she did not hear me either. And I hear.
okay, but I did speak to her before and she heard me before,
I don't know.
before you came on.
What happened to me, I was using the link from my personal page, and then I had to dig out the
Can you
fruit.
hear each other?
I was punished for paying already.
Oh, okay. Where are you speaking from?
Right now, I'm in New York City. Where are you? You're in California.
You're speaking from New York?
Yes. Yes,
Okay, no, I'm in Israel.
you're in Israel. In 2 weeks, a week from today, I'll be in Israel. For 3
Oh.
weeks, I go back and forth. So the next year, I will be in Israel. But right now,
Oh, okay.
I'm in New York City.
So have a good trip to Israel.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Toda. Thank you, Gina. I'm so glad you
Get out of
came.
here.
Really glad you came. I hope the level was okay and the English was okay and
The English is fantastic.
wonderful. Good, good. Please feel free to participate. Love to have you. You see, it's a small intimate group and everybody shares.
Looking for it,
In
do it for that.
2 weeks time, we'll be
And
here. So if you want to sign up.
Gina?
Your class in the morning.
Yes.
Is it in terms of the level and in terms of the difficulty, is it similar
Class in the morning is
on Mondays?
yes, yeah. More participation.
Okay.
Come try it. Are you free on Monday?
Do we read beforehand? People come prepared?
On the Monday morning, I bring a summary of the parasha. Which today I didn't do here, but on Monday mornings I will always, because I can't assume that people know what's the upcoming parasha, so I will bring a summary of the parasha. On Monday mornings, I always bring a summary of the
Here
parasha.
Here. Yes.
No, it's a good point. Today I felt it was important to give an introduction, but it would be very helpful to people, I think, also to go through the parasha before we look at the Midrashim. Okay. But come and try the Monday morning.
Yes, I am going to do that.
With pleasure. We also have a gentleman who's there. Con
A las 9.
Sí, a las 9. Los lunes. It's an interesting class. It's different. I've never done anything like it before. It's about Avodah Lamidot. There's a little bit of psychology, not that whatever. It's interesting. Like, what can we take to our own lives in terms of self-improvement? Interesting. After COVID and after the war, a lot of people are trying to think about how can I improve or what can we do, etc. So that's how the idea came out.
Okay.
So where are you from originally?
Mexico.
Yo
sé.
¿Conoces a mis papás? ¿A mi familia?
Mi mamá, creo que ya lo
Hablamos sobre esto.
Sí. Recuérdame quién es.
Schneebas. Kirchinovich.
Sí, sí, sí.
Son los primos de mis papás.
Schneebas.
Sí.
Mi abuela era Schneebas. Sí, sí, sí. Sí.
Pero ustedes están aquí muchos años.
6.
6.
Sí,
Pablo y Brasil. De la Ciudad de México.
sí.
Hay un doctor Schneebas, León, y su hermano, bueno, sí.
¿Y es tu primo?
Ellos son primos
Primos.
de mi papá.
Wow.
Sí.
Muy interesante. Wow.
Pero tú llevas muchísimos años aquí, ¿verdad?
Sí, mis papás se casaron y fueron de México a Estados Unidos. Pero toda la familia todavía están ahí. Los dos hermanos de mi papá fueron allá. Ahora mi prima vive en Udine, Neumann, el doctor León, es dermatólogo.
¿Se vino? ¿De México?
Su hija, él,
Su hija.
su hija está aquí.
Él es mi doctor, o sea, bueno, fue hace.
Él era muy conocido de la familia de León.
Sí, sí.
¿Y tú tienes una prima aquí en Ranama? ¿O no?
Ya no, ¿quién?
Bueno, Kersenovich. ¿Cómo se llama?
Mira.
¿Cómo se llama ella?
¿De quién?
Kersenovich, que la conocimos porque ella ayuda con gente mayor y cuando estábamos buscando ayuda para mi mamá.
Ah, sí, sí,
¿Cómo
sí.
se llama ella?
No.
Pero vive aquí.
Sí, puede ser. ¿En qué tal caso te shidur?
Te puedo decir, Telma.
Ah, sí.
Sí, Telma. Sí, es tu prima. Sí, es para mí muy complicado.
Okay.
Muy.
Qué bueno que dijiste
es muy complicado,
Sí, sí.
muy interesante, pero agarro 3 cositas. Está bien, si me quedo con 3 cositas ya es muy bueno.
Y una clase en inglés. ¿Por qué dices no? Puede ser que
No,
sí.
porque me es más fácil en
En inglés.
O sea, no tengo el vocabulario en inglés tan completo como en inglés. Yo no. ¿Por qué lo digo? Bueno, si tienes una clase que te parece.
No sé, estoy pensando. תבואו ביום שני, תנסו. את פנויה? ביום שני? נשמח מאוד. תנסי. Creo que va a ser más fácil que esto. Y también vi hoy las preguntas y lo que la
El
gente
grupo ya está mucho tiempo junto, ¿verdad?
varios años.
Sí.
Lo que pasa es que muchas de estas mujeres trabajan,
Sí.
no pueden venir a las clases de la mañana porque están en el trabajo. Entonces, la idea es que hay también algo en la noche, pero para la gente que trabaja. כאילו, זה לא פייר שכל השיעורים במתן הם רק בבוקר. זה נכון. אז מי שבא לשיעור באנגלית בערב, זה אותה קבוצה, כן? por las mismas razones que trabajan y una vez por 2 semanas, no cada semana.
Sí. Ah, entonces, pero los lunes sí es todos
Sí.
los lunes. Tú también das clases afuera de Montaña.
Sí.
Y no tienes una clase.
Si quieres organizar algo, estaría muy interesante. Mira, a mí no me importa si la clase, el shiur es en inglés o en híbrido, pero la discusión entre todo el mundo es en español. Para mí, dar el shiur en español es difícil. Yo no creo que tengo el vocabulario, pero זה שכולם מדברים בספרדית, ביניהם, יהיה לי מצוין, אין לי שום בעיה. אם אתם בסדר, אם אני אעביר באנגלית ובעברית, pero todo el mundo en la clase puede hablar en español.
Pero es gente que no sabe nada.
כן, זה לא מפחיד אותי. עשיתי הרבה דברים, beginners, ממש.
Bueno, voy a preguntar.
Gracias, muchas gracias.
מצוין, אוקיי, תהיי בקשר. ¿Quieres mi email?
Sí,
Estaremos en contacto. Muy bien, ok. ¿Tienes un grupo de gente que están interesados? Besimcha.
¿Cuántos mínimo quieres?
No sé.
Voy a.
תעשי קצת שיעורי בית. מצוין. תודה רבה, לילה טוב.
Hello, nice to say hi.
I'm so glad you came. So I see you're in the Tzava. Yes.
Yeah. No, I came straight from the Tzava, that's fine. But I'm doing yoga. I'm doing a Kusnativ.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So my instructor told me that I live in Altea and I was looking for Shiva Torah. They have sometimes in Motzach, right? But I was looking for something like more.
Where's your English from?
I'm from Germany, but I learned in school there and I live in Canada.
Where in Germany?
Next to Munich. So interesting. Yeah. You're from America?
Yes. My daughter is going next week and she goes to Germany.
Oh, really? For how long?
Till August.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Where's she come from?
I can't say it. Helen. I can't pronounce it even.
Helen.
There's a university there. Going to work with students.
Cool. There?
Yeah.
So, very cool.
Wonderful. So this could count towards shiurim in terms of personality?
Yes. No, but I'm more as well. But I'm more looking. I'm just trying to find like a community that I'm like more used to. My dad's Israeli, and I grew up with like some of the community.
Do you have a big Christian community that you're going to?
So yeah, so I'm going to. I don't know if you know. It's a business in Italy. My host family is going.
Yes, very
And
nice.
there's and also the business of studying from. I live next to Ireland.
Oh, wonderful.
So they have like
Is
the.
there shiurim there at IGC?
So I'm trying to figure it out. Last Saturday, the rabbi wasn't there, and the Saturday before that, I was afraid to talk to him. So if you know him, I would. Or
No, but let me take your number. And I'm going to find out about shiurim for you there.
That would be amazing. I would love that. Because I would love to go
Let me
there.
just turn this off. Yes, because it will be,
But I also really enjoyed this too, and I will go